Welcome back to A Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes. This week, I'm delighted to be joined by Scott Beaton. No relation to John. Should have said that. Should have clarified that. Welcome to A Celtic State of Mind, Scott Beaton. I was going to say welcome to Bad, but you live here.
I do. So it's been great. It's been a great journey. We've been here for, must be nearly 18 months now, probably a bit more. Alongside yourself, obviously, coming in and doing loads of live shows, fan zones, everything else. You guys have played a huge part in Bad, and how when we've came in and we had that relationship already. Now, I have been a fanboy since COVID of you guys. I think you, and you've heard this story a million times before, I'm sure, that during the kind of dark days of COVID and Celtic weren't playing well, I kind of stumbled across A Celtic State of Mind, and it kind of got me through hospitality. We were all furloughed.
Yeah.
We had so many restrictions and everything else, and to be honest, we were just bored, twiddling my thumbs. And now I came across you guys, and then it was me just hooked every day. And then when I came back, we all came back from COVID. I was lucky enough to get the opportunity to come in here, and then you guys had already done some live shows and stuff in here, and I thought, this is brilliant. Like this is it. I'm so excited to work with you guys, and it's been great.
It has been great. And by the way, this is not a 1 hour advert about Bad. And that's not the purpose of it. We spoke ages ago.
Yeah.
And you said to me, aye, anytime you want to chat about Celtic on Acsom, I'm your man. Because I know you're a Celtic fan, obviously, over the piece. But we've all jumped back and forward into what we've been doing here, because this is, for me, a bit of a hub for Acsom. And the gigs we've done in here have been memorable. Like, every night that we've done in here has been incredible. But obviously the last one we did was a non-Celtic event. Manny more or less turned it into a Celtic event.
He did.
I mean, you were manning the VIP.
Oh.
You seen him interacting with the fans. He was unreal, wasn't he?
First class. And I think it doesn't matter if you come from the music world, the sport world, the business world, whatever it is, if you can hold court with a Glaswegian crowd, then it says something about you. It says the kind of man you are, and it seemed a real man of the people. You know, like I said, I was manning that kind of VIP bit. There was a couple of wee guys outside, young fans, and like, can we get an autograph? And I think you told the story before. It said, he turned round to us and said, make sure these guys get a signature on this stuff. And that was just him. That was just him in a nutshell. And it was great. And this is probably one of the last places, if not the last place that he'd done a kind of live show, especially in Scotland. And that's a real credit and a real tribute to say that we were part of that, and for an absolute music legend. That's not my scene of music, 100%. But I can relate to it.
Were you into dance?
I've had a couple of years in Ibiza and enjoying myself with that kind of stuff.
Ibiza, young.
Oh,
never been.
It's a bit of a crazy world. It's almost like Glasgow in the sunshine. It's probably that crazy.
Is there kind of two destinations? Is it the party scene and then the old town? Is that right?
So when you go out there and you've been a few times, and you've been out there for quite a lot of time and stuff, you tend to stay away from the party bit behind your days off, and you go and chill out a wee bit and just kind of take it easy. I learned that the kind of third time I went there, you can't party all the time. And I think especially not these days. So
you've got to know my missus through the events.
Yeah.
If we went to Ibiza, I'd probably be in the old town. She'd be at the party.
100%.
The party zone.
100%. Especially your boy when he was in for the fan zone the other night, I think.
He's getting into it.
That's he's definitely takes off after the missus, doesn't he?
He absolutely does. But you know what? I think you made a point there, and I was thinking about this. Manny potentially appeared live on stage for the final time in here, and I don't mean to be morbid, but my Stone Roses journey, I remember it. First time hearing Stone Roses, I was up a tree in Pennycook, and there was a group of guys who ran about with my big sister at the time, who would be in the local park in Pennycook. If you know Pennycook, it's a huge big park, right? And I was sitting up a tree, because as you did, Bairns did that back then, Scott, right?
The iPads, innit?
Exactly. And these guys, this group of guys, and sorry, Melanie, you were involved, they would pick mushrooms, and they'd have a ghetto blaster, and basically, you know, you couldn't play football as a result of that. But I remember the song, it was Sally Cinnamon. Now, that was actually before Manny joined the band, Sally Cinnamon, right? But that was my introduction to the Roses. And then, of course, they split up at a time where I hadn't seen them pre-96. They had split up before I probably had the means to go and see them live. My mate was at Glasgow Green, and it was always my dream to see the Roses reforming, to see Oasis reforming, and not only did I see that, I also saw Rangers dying. So in my lifetime, Scott, I've seen it all. And then for them to come back, getting a ticket for Heaton Park, if anybody ever said to me, you're going to share a stage with Manny, I would never, ever believe. I know that sounds cliche. I would never have believed that. But we've also shared the stage in here with Martin O'Neill a few times.
Yeah.
I want to talk about Martin O'Neill. I think this season potentially is a tale of three managers. Obviously, we start with Brendan Rodgers and we'll talk about him. Martin O'Neill currently in place.
Yep.
We're recording this on Tuesday afternoon. Who knows what's going to happen the next few days before this goes out? And then, of course, the incoming Wilfred Nonce. So it's the tale of three managers. And we'll start with O'Neill because you've had an opportunity to meet him in here. The guy, he's unbelievable. I mean, I've said this to people. He spent more time talking to me about music and Peter Sutcliffe than he did about football. He's a brain, right? And he was so interested in the Yorkshire Ripper case that he went to the trial to just to watch, just to observe in the public gallery as a young student at the time. He studied law for a spell, didn't go through the whole shebang, and he went and watched. This is the kind of intrinsic nature of this guy's mindset, very much so. But every time he was in here, I never got a sense that he would ever manage a game of football again, Scott. I thought he was out to grass. What a sensational impact he's made.
No, and it's been outstanding since he came back. And like you said, when he's been here, he's been first class. He's been first class with us guys. He's been first class with the team in here. And he was first class again with the Glasgow crowd. And again, very similar to Manny, if you can conduct yourself and hold your own in that kind of crowd, then that says more about you as a man than it does about anything else. But he as an artist, he's so great with his words, and I think the Celtic team have kind of seen that, and they've kind of believed in that since he's came back. I think obviously there's a lot of chat beforehand about Brendan and you know the famous Honda Civic thing and all that, and myself, obviously I coach a football team, so you know how negative your words can be as an impact, and you've got a new voice coming in and saying you're great and putting an arm around the shoulder. And the famous one was in his first spell with Bobby Better. You know, and a wee bit of an arm around the shoulder. And I think that's what he's came in and done to the whole club, not just the players, but the whole club. At a time when, you know, the clubs needed a guy to come in and just put those kind of arms around them and say, look, everything's going to be all right. You know, Celtic will still be here the 100 years, even though the board, they seem to think we won't be here the 100 years if we don't save some pennies. But they've said, he's kind of put that arm around everybody and kind of said, you know what? Everything's going to be all right, and we will still be Celtic, and we will win games of football, and these players are good players, and that's the reason they're at Celtic. And you've seen a lot of them, their forms just skyrocket. Look at Yang. I mean, that's unbelievable. Maybe we had the fans on Thursday night, and the two of us kind of turned around each other and went, where is this Yang being? I think he's been locked in a cover for 2 weeks, and Martin O'Neill just let him out, and he's fantastic. But he's not the only one. You see it in the kind of guys who've been at Callum McGregor. You know, everybody came in and said that when at the start of the season, is he done? Is his legs gone? And blah, blah, blah. And look at him, again, ran the show against Feyenoord, him, Engels, Hatate. I mean, that's the best I've seen Hatate play in probably a year. Probably since the Bayern game in the Champions League last year. That's probably been Hatate's best win. But you can't underestimate the influence of a manager on that. It's not all tactics. That's not tactics. That's not formations. That's not set pieces or anything like that. That's a man manager going in there and being able to talk to them and guide them and everything else. And you know, it doesn't matter what way of life, what you do for a living. If you've got a leader there who leads from the front, you know, will take the hits for you and protect his team and get them going, you get performance out of them tenfold than what you do if you're very much so kind of knock them in the head all thing.
I think it's management. It's management in any walk of life, Scott. And at this age, I've worked for some managers that I wouldn't trust to put my bins out on a Thursday, and I've worked for other managers that actually give you that momentum, the self-belief, the confidence, and a bounce. You walk out a room feeling like 10 feet tall. That sounds cliched, but I've been listening for years now to people like Chris Sutton, John Hartson, Jackie McNamara, Johan Mialbi, Stan Petrov, guys who played, and Neil Lennon. I did, when I wasn't in his bad books, we did do a gig with Neil Lennon, and they all speak about Martin O'Neill in such a way that, you know, they would go to battle for him, no matter what. Alan Thompson tells a great story about Martin O'Neill. So the 6-2 game, Thompson hadn't signed, but he was in the crowd. He'd been invited up by the club, and he's watching his game. He's blown away by it. You know, he's a big Newcastle fan, I mean this like seriously. I think in British football, in terms of fan bases, from my experience, Celtic fan base, Liverpool, Newcastle, having kind of been part of games and being in the atmosphere, there's a similarity in terms of passion there, right? Between Newcastle, Celtic, Liverpool. I'm talking fan bases, not clubs. And Tomo was blown away. By the time we play them at Ibrox, they beat us 5-1.
That's right. The next
Tomo
game,
gets
guys,
sent
that's right.
off. He gets sent off in that game. And O'Neill went through him in the dressing room, called him a coward. You know, so you get a sense of the way that he approaches things. Chris Sutton, to this day, I was listening to his latest show with Chris Boyd. He says to this day, he's the one guy in football that still scares him. Like he walks in a room and you kind of like adjust the gaffer sitting the whole thing. He is the gaffer. And you see that respect even when recently, since he's taken over, and Neil Lennon's on whatever broadcast that he's on, and he calls him gaffer. He calls him boss. Back in the day, having spoken to guys like Danny McGrain, etc., they still called, like 40 years later, Jock Stein Mr. Stein. There was this level of respect that never ever leaves them. So when Martin O'Neill returns to the football club, one of the guys I've mentioned, Chris Sutton, spoke about tarnishing a legacy. That was his fear. He never said he was going to. He just said, I'm fearful that he might tarnish his legacy. He's done the exact opposite, Scott, to the point where I'm actually sitting here and I'm of the view that it's a bad time to change manager.
Yeah.
Where are you with this?
No, I agree. I think if you've got, and I know people say age and all that kind of thing. If you've got a real man manager, it doesn't matter what is there. If they've got a team and they've galvanised them, and they've got that level of respect, and he commands that. Even like you said, when he came in here, he just commanded that respect, and that he commanded the room and everything else. And if he's doing that in the dressing room, then why would you change it? And I think if he's getting results, some fantastic results, probably results that if we were sitting here a month ago, we'd have said, right, we'd have went through and went, don't know about that, probably getting beat there, lucky to get a point here, whatever it might be. He's walked away with only one defeat.
I know.
And it's mad, you know, he's got us in a cup final and everything else, and yet we're looking forward to getting a new manager with some great ideas. I've kind of listened about Wilfred Nancy coming in, but at the same time, there's part of you going, let's keep going this journey. There's a little bit of me as well, because Martin O'Neill's, I mean, when I was younger, my first team was Tommy Burns' team, then we had the Wim Jansen team. That was the real ones I get really in about, and then Martin O'Neill was a kind of bigger part of my life there. And there's part of me that just wants to see him lift another trophy. And I think he deserves it. I think a guy who's put his hand up and said, I'll come and help. What do you need me to do? And he's kind of working just now week to week. Doesn't know if he's going to be in the dugout
I know.
next week or whatever it might be. So, and that takes a lot as well. And sometimes people don't realise that as well. When you're a manager and you're trying to put this across to your players, this level of confidence and everything's going to be all right. In the back of your mind, you're going, I don't know if I'm going to be here next week or whatever it might be. But you can't let your team know that. You can't let your colleagues or whatever know that. You've kind of got to be that outward guy as in, everything, I'm here, everything's go all right kind of thing. So there's part of you kind of wants them to stay for that stability, and hopefully there's part that's going to continue on with the club. That would be great.
I've been thinking of the different roles that he could undertake, and by the way, there's many because he brings so much experience and talent into the room that there might be for me an opportunity to say, right, what is our football department? What does it look like? And does the head of that football department behave like a head of football department?
Yep.
Have you ever heard Paul Tisdale speaking?
I thought.
Right, so he's the head of the football department and he doesn't speak. Every single question that's aimed towards the football club goes to Martin O'Neill.
Yeah.
So at this moment in time, we're talking about, fan issues. And what I mean by issues is they've got an issue with the club, with the board, not necessarily the club, but with the board. We've got the boardroom, we've got the recruitment. There's a lot of things to discuss. And all Martin O'Neill's trying to do is put a football team on the park to win football games. They keep going back to that basic purpose. We just need to win football games, right? But there's all this other things surrounding the winning of football games, and all the questions are aimed at Martin O'Neill. And he's dealt with it brilliantly. He's dealt with it with a bit of humour. He's dealt with it again. I just think sometimes he'll give you a bit, other times he'll give you nothing, right? He knows when to give you a bit. I mean, it was him that's revealed that it's Nonsie. The club have never mentioned Wilfred Nonsie, right?
Let's say his name, have they?
But they've asked O'Neill about it, and twice I think he's kind of conceded he is the man. And he says he's definitely going after the Dundee game. But he said he was definitely going after during the international break, Scott. So I'm not sure if he actually knows. And I'm starting to get a wee bit concerned about that, because we're not great at concluding deals, which is one of the biggest issues that the Celtic Fans Collective have had with the football club right now. And we have got past, we've got previous for not getting a management deal over the line. Eddie Howe. Now, by the way, I'm not losing any sleep over it because we got Ange and everything was fine.
Yeah.
But we've been here before. At what point does it become a concern for you that Nonsie hasn't been done, hasn't been announced?
I think it's a strange one, and I know that the kind of chat was it's to do with paperwork and stuff like that. I don't know if that's because of Brexit or whatever our ties are now in the global industry, and particularly in football, and how that kind of all correlates and how it works to get the guy over here. But like you said, I think there's a lot of experience on that board in certain fields, and I know we spoke about it. He's a contracts guy and he's a finance guy, but there's no football guy there, you know. And I think that is where maybe we can put Martin O'Neill in to be the football guy.
Yeah.
On that board as kind of non-exec and saying, look, I think you're right. This will work and this will work, but it won't work in football. So how do we knit all that together with? I mean, you've got guys like on there like Peter Lawwell, who's fantastic experience. He's been in the high end of UEFA boards and things like that, and that's great, you know. But there's not a born and bred footballer in there who knows the game and knows the intrinsic parts of the game, and you know, could he be good at making deals happen? You know, where if you're speaking to Wilfred Nonsie and actually this is what it's really like here, and this is how I can help you, and you know, again, putting that arm around someone who's just new. And I think maybe putting Martin O'Neill into that part, you know, as part of the board and helping conclude deals with something like that, that'd be amazing. Because I think if you're coming at it, like for me, if I was going to another venue or whatever, and it was day one, the first thing you look for is, right, who's the guy who knows everything? And for me, to get Wilfred Nonsie over the line, can Martin O'Neill play a part? Has he played a part? We don't know about it. Who knows? But you're right. You know, we had the whole Dolberg thing over the summer, where we thought this guy's in the bag, and then it turns out European tax stuff or whatever it was the excuse in the end, was the thing. So it is worrying that the deal's not concluded yet, because I think the fans have kind of started to buy into it. You know, there's a lot of fans I know that speak really highly of him. There's other guys that go, I'm not sure. And I think some of the fans who are on the kind of not sure camp are thinking, oh, is the board had second thoughts? Is that what it is?
Yeah.
You know? And I think, and we've spoken about it before, the club communication sometimes has been great towards fans. And I think that's what we kind of need, because if you have a gap in communication, it doesn't matter if it's football or whatever else you do, if you have that gap in communication, then it's open to interpretation.
Yep.
By the layman and the guys who are not in the know. You know, you've started to put your own stories in there, and we're all on WhatsApp groups and everything else that say, oh, this is a rumour, this rumour's happening, and that's probably not coming from any source. It's just a gap in it, and somebody sells something and they made up their story to fill out all their bikes. And I think if you put Martin O'Neill into that kind of board there and help conclude deals going forward, that could be a really big thing. But hopefully we get Wilfred Nonsie over the line, and maybe there's a good handover part with Martin O'Neill in there as well, and that could play a massive role in it. But for me, it is worrying, but fingers crossed we'll get there in the end. So, you know, you've kind of got to trust the board, and I know that's maybe hard for a lot of fans to do just now, is trust the board. You've kind of got to trust these guys to say, let's get this guy over the line, whatever it is, he's sorted. And I'm sure, given how Dermot Desmond and he came out and what he said about Brendan Rodgers, that would be super keen to get this guy in and kind of take all that flack away and make it in a chip shop newspaper.
See, the thing that you mentioned there about if they don't communicate, there's a void, right? And there's now a void, and it's not just the press that are filling the void. Fans have been given a voice with technology when it comes to blogging and vlogging, and anybody with a phone can have a voice on TikTok like that, you know, and put their opinion out there. So it's a void that they need to do better in filling. Now, when it comes to the manager, since Brendan Rodgers has left the football club, we've had no update. No update from the club in relation to the long-term or even medium-term plan. It's all come from Martin O'Neill. We find ourselves in a situation where in 4 weeks' time we're in the January transfer window. I think it's the biggest transfer window in many a year in relation to its make or break for this season. Because, right, I don't think Hearts are firing on all cylinders, and they've got a January transfer window to put that right as well. I don't think Rangers are a great side, but they're going to win more games than they're not under the new manager, and I'm pretty sure they'll do something in the January transfer window. The second half of this season will massively, I think, depend on your performance in the transfer window in January. So we're in a situation where we don't have the new guy in charge. You've got an interim boss who's come in and absolutely, I think, performed tremendously. If you were to ask me, right, pick one game that O'Neill can lose, what would the game be? You'd probably say one of the Europa League games.
Yeah.
Right. So we're still in the Europa League. We're into a cup final and we're closing the gap at the top. You would choose one of the Europa League games, right, under the circumstances. And that's what's happened. And we'll probably come up against the Michelin team who are on a trajectory at the moment, Scott, whereby they might end up in a European final this year, right? And if they do, we'll probably look back on that result and say, right, it was away from home, loads of injuries. You can't, I think, underestimate the impact of losing the type of talent that we've lost in Alistair Johnston at right back, Cameron Carter-Vickers, although Trusty's done brilliantly in coming in, and your number one striker, regardless of how it came to be your number one striker, Ian Atchell, injured. Some of the more long-term ones, you look at Jota, etc. as well, and we've gone to Michelin and they've beaten us well. But I think we'll look back on that result and say, well, fair enough.
Yeah.
Under the circumstances, that was expected. And you've then got a manager, an interim manager, as you say, who can then not only report his findings to the new gaffer, right, but work with the transfer team, work with the recruitment department, the football department, and say to Paul Tisdale, right, see if we need a left back. That left back cannot be a 250 grand punt from Japanese football, because that's what we got in the summer. See if we need a centre forward. The centre forward can't be Shin Yamada, who barely kicked a ball in the last 6 months for his team over in Japan. We need a proper replacement. I mean, I was going to say for Ida. We need a replacement for Kyogo, never mind Ida. And it has to be a quality replacement, someone who's actually going to be playing in the starting 11. The point was made, if you look at the Feyenoord game and you look at the game at the weekend against Hibs, only one new signing started those games. So that to me says there's an issue with recruitment, Scott. So we're going into January. The recruitment team remains the same, right? The manager's going to be different. One way or another, it's either going to be O'Neill or Nonce, but it's still the same recruitment team identifying the players.
The recruitment team's even been depleted, obviously. Jay Lafauve's leaving, and can it go back to that makeup of what that team, that kind of higher end team of the club is? Look at the teams who do well. Bayern Munich, for instance, they had Karl-Heinz Rummenigge in there. He was the one that was communicating everything out. It wasn't the manager. A lot of the time they were going to him and he was putting a face on it, and he was technical director or whatever he was at Bayern Munich. All these other teams in the continent have football people in there that knit everything else together, because I know the only thing that we all care about is the product in the park a lot of the time, but there's a lot more to running a football club than there is what us guys see day in, day out. So, but that is a football club, so you've got to have that guy in there who can knit all that together. And I mean, going into January, if Martin O'Neill can give advice to the recruitment team, to Wilfred Nonce when he comes in and whatever else, to say, look, this guy's great, this guy's not great, whatever it is. But I think there's a lot of work to do. No, there is. I mean, we've got a massively lopsided team. We're still rolling out James Forrest in the right-hand side. James Forrest is, I mean, in his late 30s now, coming into his mid-30s to late 30s, not even like in his young 30s, and that's a kind of best option at right wing. I know Luke McCowan's kind of come in there and played fantastically well, but he's not a right-hand sided player. And I know you're saying there that Ian Atchell's our number one striker, he is a top striker, but I mean, the quality from Kyogo down to Ian Atchell is massive, and like you said, you've had that stepping stone at Ida in there as well. And if you look at the striking option now compared to what they were, if we sat here this time last year and spoke about it, massive. But I think the club have to get this right. And they need to use every resource they've got. There's hundreds of good Celtic men, and I mean, if that's the thing that defines you as being able to help or whatever, as being a good Celtic man, there's guys with talent and knowledge and everything else round about there that can step in and go, we can help with this transfer window, be it Martin O'Neill or ex-players or former coaches or whatever it might be. Guys who are out there doing scouting like Tufkinley, whatever, you know, having ex-players out, Shinsuke Nakamura, for instance, in Japan, see if you can help us out. That kind of thing. Use all the tools you've got, but I think sometimes we're just a little bit insular in how we kind of want to go about it. It's almost like a closed shop.
Yeah.
To a certain extent, you know, where let's get more people involved. The more people, the more eyes and ears you've got everywhere. And that's what these kind of smaller teams are doing, and they're doing really well. They've got scouting network and data driven and everything else. But what one thing we have as a Celtic, as a club, we've got some great former players. I don't think, and former managers, whatever, and I don't think we utilise what our net actually is there, and I think we could do that a lot better.
We definitely could, Scott. Even if you look at the crop of players that Martin O'Neill worked with first time round, right? You've got Craig Bellamy, who's managing Wales. You've got Chris Sutton, who's got his finger on the pulse in terms of punditry in Scottish football. But you've also got guys that we've had on live events, Johan Mjalby, whose knowledge of Swedish football is tremendous. You've got wee Lubo, who, you know, he actually said to us, at no point has Celtic ever said to him, you know, who's the top 3 players in your region? He's never been given the opportunity. And I think one of the missed opportunities who wasn't and Jackie McNamara for me is definitely somebody you need to tap into, right? Jackie McNamara's knowledge at various levels of football, from player to agent to manager to CEO, has resulted in him now running his own agency.
You look at Andy Robertson, don't you?
I know.
Andy Robertson, here's the pin-up for Jackie McNamara.
Yep. Even recently, the young boy Davani, playing for Crystal Palace, getting capped for his country, scoring goals in charity shield games. Jackie McNamara's got his finger on the pulse in terms of up-and-coming talent, but also, you know, worldwide global scouting network. Now, the use of data, I think it's one of the ones now where this is not new. You know, we know it's been part of football for a long time now. Celtic are using the same data systems as Airdrie. That's where we are. That's what we use. They're using systems that you and I could get a subscription for, right? So they talk about Jamestown Analytics. It's been one of the biggest stories in Scottish football this season, Heart of Midlothian. And we know that the other teams that Tony Bloom has been involved in has utilised his system to great effect. But I was looking at it quite recently because we were linked to Kieran McKenna coming in from Ipswich, and you look at the way that he was able to go up into the Premiership. One little detail that I wasn't aware of is the fact that they were using Jamestown until they get into the Premiership, and then Tony Bloom was like, right, you're no longer getting a licence for that because Brighton are in the Premiership. Yeah. So there was a conflict of interest, if you like. So the Jamestown licence, Scott, is £1 million a year. £1 million a year. So if you're a football club anywhere in the world and you're not in the same league as one of these other teams, you pay £1 million and you get access to this database that obviously is all singing and all dancing. But it's not the only gold standard data system that's out there. So you've got other wee guys like you and me who are a wee bit interested in data. We could have an Acsom show once a week or once a month, and we could subscribe to various different sites and we'll get all the data, right? But then you take it up a level. It's like every world. It's like, you know, the videographer in here can film things to an industry standard, whereas you and me might do it on our iPhones, right? So the industry gold standard when it comes to data analysis, there's various systems out there. And our Celtic, because I found it interesting that this was dropped in during, I think it was one of the set-up interviews that Michael Nicholson did with Jerry McCulloch for Celtic TV, that was part of the video that they played at the AGM that nobody's seen. And he talked about data analysis, or it might have been in Ross Desmond's statement that he was reading out for his dad. Data analysis, well, there is no excuse for a club like Celtic, with their financial backing and all that money in the bank, to have anything other than the best system. Heart of Midlothian should not have a better data system than Celtic, Scott. Agreed. We're so behind the curve when it comes to this. And I think that it comes down to money. And it comes down to the fact that I made the point the other week, and I'm constantly getting reports to people that work for Celtic now where I'm basically on the naughty step, right? So I've had 4 now. There's 4 different people. Celtic don't have a backy jersey sponsor. You notice that this season, we don't have a back of jersey sponsor. That's worth £1 million to the football club. So somebody's not doing their job. Get the sponsor on the back of the jersey, pump that money into a data system, and actually benefit from it, Scott. And I think that we're becoming complacent. We're becoming lazy. If we now introduce data, we're already kind of out of step. It should have been happening years ago.
And I think, goodbye, you're talking about industry standard. You know, industry standard in Scottish football and industry standard in European football are miles apart. I don't know ever going to get wider. And we've seen that, you're talking about Midtjylland earlier on there and how they've utilised data and everything else. And if you're a big club from a small league, surely you should be one of the trendsetters in trying to find new ways to bridge that gap between us and the big boys when you go to Europe, you know. And yeah, we'll have our rivals in this league. You know, we've got Rangers, we've got Hearts obviously this season and anything else. But let's be fair, given the resources and everything else they'll deal with, it should be a cakewalk. It should be every season until one of these guys, and I know like said Rangers have come in and they've got investment, Hearts have come in and got an investment and stuff. So they're trying to bridge that gap, and Hearts have brought in the data thing. So they're actively trying to bridge that gap between Hearts and Celtic, but Celtic don't seem to be trying to bridge that gap between Celtic and your Liverpools and your European big boys and stuff. And European big boys were maybe beaten 10 years ago, you know, Barcelona, Celtic Park, and then I remember Martin O'Neill's first time, Juventus and all these kind of big teams coming there, and we're giving them all bloody noses and sending them up the road, you know. But now there doesn't seem to be that appetite to go and do that anymore. And yeah, I understand. We're not daft. We understand finance. There's a lot of intelligent people in the Celtic community, you know, talking there about data. You've got Alan Morrison, who's obviously on the show a lot of time. Quirry, who's on all the time. These guys really dig in the data. And sometimes I think maybe the club shouldn't see guys like yourself and the social media guys and everything else as a threat, and maybe utilise these guys and go, you know what, and watch Quinny on and watch Alan Morrison and the Huddle Breakdown and that's and whatever else, and go, right, these guys actually have got a passion for this, they've got a knowledge for it. How do we use these really good minds to bridge that gap? You know, and I think there's a lot of good people in the Celtic community. And a wee bit back, like I was saying there about former players getting involved in scouting networks and everything else in recruitment. There's some fantastic guys who are good Celtic supporting guys who are passionate about the club, really want the club to do well. They don't want to see any harm come to it, and that's what we're all like. But they're just frustrated at why are these guys being able to do this and the club aren't. And yeah, okay, Celtic might have someone like that, an Alan Morrison or a Quinny or whatever in there, but are we utilising that? And like I said, we really should be the trendsetters of thinking new ideas to bridge the gaps and thinking that. And I think we were there at one point, you know, we were bringing in guys like Victor Wanyama and things like that. And, you know, they were really great players and they were able to do really great things, and Van Dijk's and stuff. That kind of period, I think we were doing that. But now it seems to have fell away. And just speaking there about complacency, is it that because, you know, we do win the Scottish League more often than not, but that's, for us as fans, that's not enough anymore. We want to go back to giving these big teams bloody notices in the European stage.
Yeah, without a doubt. And by the way, just punch at your weight, because if you punch at your weight, you're doing better than what we are now. Yeah. The 7 out of 9 is a terrible indictment. The 7 times that we failed to qualify when we've been in qualification rounds is no good enough. So a famous victory against Barcelona, we're all going to enjoy it, Scott. But if you were to punch at your weight, you would be doing far better now than we have done in recent years. I've got 2 direct examples of Celtic and data, right? First one, I'm trying to remember the year, right? Barry Ferguson was the manager at Clyde. So there's your reference point, right? And that will become clear as to how I can remember that. This is bizarre. These wee bizarre things happen from time to time. I wrote a book back in 2013 called The Quality Street Gang. One of the players from that team was called Vic Davidson. And he was one of the classic tales. I know you played football and you played with some great players as well. Yeah. I think most of us can say 2 or 3 guys that might have gone senior and all that. And then there's the best player who never made it and all this stuff, right?
100%.
Aye. So
wasn't me, by the way.
No,
there were better players than me.
That dodgy elbow, I'll keep going back to it, right? And the lack of ability. But Vic Davidson was the one that everybody thought was going to be the cream of the crop, you know. And his trajectory was much steeper than Dalglish's to a point. And they'd played with Glasgow United, and Andy Lynch was part of that racket as well. But for some reason or other, Vic Davidson never really fulfilled his potential at Celtic. After his career was finished, he went over to the States, and it was in the States that he remained, became a coach, coaching youth football and all the rest of it, right? So when I was doing the book, I tend to keep in touch with people and all the rest of it, Scott. So I got a message for Vic one time. This is a bizarre story, where he comes in and he's like, "I've found a player," right? He says, "in all the years I've coached over here," he says, "I have never felt compelled to try and get a player over to Celtic. This is the best talent I've ever seen or played with. Is there anything you can do?" This is a true story. So the chap, and he won't mind me saying this, but the chap who really helped me in the early days of the Quality Street Gang was part of the team, believe it or not, and his name is John Murray. Big shout out to John. And John's a major shareholder at Celtic. Not the majority, he's got a lot of shares. And I said, my only contact at that time at Celtic is John. So I says to John, I go, "You're never going to believe this, but your ex-teammate, Vic Davidson, wants to send a player over for trial." And John was like, "Really?" So I showed him the message. He goes, "Right, that's interesting. That he's the best talent he's played with, right? Seen or played with." He says, "Because he played with Dalglish, who wasn't a bad player." And I was like, "Aye, this is what I'm thinking." So anyway, believe it or not, a long story short, John, via Peter Lowell, organised to get this kid over from the States. His name is Carlos Franco. I just felt as though he sounded like some Colombian drug baron. Carlos Franco. And he comes over and he plays I think it was 3 bounce games. And this is how I remember the Clyde thing. Barry Ferguson, it was the Clyde first team versus a Celtic side that had young guys in it like Tony Ralston, I think. Mikey Johnson definitely played. And Carlos, right? Now, the reason I'm telling you the story isn't because, I brought this player over and became, a legend, because we never signed him.
Right.
But he came over for a trial. At the end of the trial, John was very keen because John had spoken to the boy's dad. He had got the dad to agree to allow the fella to come over for a 2 or 3 week trial. He's in Glasgow on his own, Scott. I was looking at him going, at that age, I couldn't have done this. I could not have travelled to the States on my own. I still get lost in airports, right? And so we were trying to help the kid. So at the end of it, John had been to all the games. He had watched every single kick of the ball. And he wanted an update at the end because he wanted to feed it back, obviously, to the boy's dad. And there was no update. So eventually we had to chase. And eventually, Chris McCart, the head of academy, still there, said, "No, we've got better here. It's fine, he's gone home. We've got better." That was it. So John was like, "Right, okay. This is an experience for the boy, an experience that he'll want to learn from. Can you give us the data?
Have you got
the performance data?" Right? So data analytics isn't just recruitment data. It's data as to how you're performing, how I'm performing, and how the opposition is performing. So we can analyse who we're playing. Right, we'll come back to it. Right, can you make it quick so the boy can take it home? And obviously show his dad or his coach over there, or show Vic. It turns out they didn't have any data. Right, so they said they lost it. There was an issue with the computer system.
Right.
Scott, they'd never had any data. So we get a kid coming over from the States, right, for a trial, and then going home. And that's it. He doesn't go home with a wee package or a dossier. He played 3 games. This is how he performed at training. This was the readings. This was the strength test. This was the speed test. Blah, blah, blah. He needs to improve on X, Y, and Z. Nothing.
That's bizarre.
No development plan.
I think you see the opposite happening going the other way. You know, my brother was lucky enough to go and do the scholarship over in America to play football as well. But when he was over here, these independent little businesses that send boys over to America to play, he had to play trial games. They were all videoed, they were all analysed by coaches, all the data and stuff was given over to the colleges in America, and they said, "Right, we'll take this guy, right, we need, right, how many centre midfielders you got in your books, right, we've got this guy, he's this age and whatever, and he's studying what's his data." So going the other way, it was always there, and these small independent guys were doing it. So that's quite strange to see that we didn't have it at the time as well. And particularly, I suppose that story in particular, I'm sure that all the expense was put on the family and stuff like that, and I suppose it's a bit of a respect thing, isn't it? To back up the road and say, and look, we've all had it, as I said, you've got that disappointment of you're not good enough. you know, and yeah, it happens to the 99.9% of boys who play football. You know, you're just simply not good enough to be at that level. And that's all right. That's okay. But it's a wee bit like in my industry where I'm measured against KPIs, you know, you're measured against turnover and your profitability and wage labour percentage and everything else in there. So you've got KPIs and I'm measured every day in here at Bad. I'm measured every week in Bad, you know, so, and it's great because you know where you're at and it's great and you have that relationship. But to send somebody away with no KPIs, you know, you can do it in this industry, so why would it in football?
I found it really disappointing, to use Tavernier's favourite word, really disappointing that I never put any effort into it. I joined a few dots, that was it.
Yeah.
But the boy and his family put a lot of effort in. John put loads of effort in. Vic put loads of effort in. And it was the fact that he had to chase them only to be told some kind of excuse, we don't have anything. So the guy's gone home. And his experience with Celtic, I don't think has been a positive one, right? And then, a wee bit more closer to now, I think it was about 4 or 5 years ago, and there was a data-driven model being used at Queen's Park to the point where they were promoted from the bottom tier of Scottish football to within a whisker of being in the Premiership. One game,
That's it.
coil, minutes for getting into the Premiership, one coil. And a big part of that in terms of the youth development and also recruitment was data, right? And they had a system. And I went down and I got the presentation and it blew me away. Some people think I've got no interest in data analysis. I do, but I think it's a tool. I don't think it's the be-all and end-all. It's a tool in the great inner workings of football. And I think Martin O'Neill's proved that actually since he's come in. So I went and I seen this. It was incredible. And they'd done a case study, right? And they had two players. They don't tell you who the players are. And they give you everything that they've got. And I'm talking, they've now got things on boots where it tells you how quick you are, how successful you are with your left or your right, and everything. And a player versus a player, and at the end the question is, who do you sign? And it was as clear as day to somebody like me, a layman. You sign player B. Well, player B was Ivan Toney and player 1 was Albion Ayeti, right? And if you had used even just raw data without watching a kick of the ball, it was clear that you don't sign Ayeti. You just don't do it. You certainly don't spend £5 million on him, right? So that same presentation was done all over the country, right? Because I think the idea there was, and it wasn't they were trying to punt it to me, but other clubs might want to actually utilise the system that they were using. Celtic were given that presentation. Peter Lawwell was the man in the room, and he was given the presentation, and he never got back to them in relation to taking that under their wing. Now this is post Ajeti, right? So there's been many seasons since then where we're only now, Scott, saying, oh, that data analysis thing that people keep banging on about, maybe we should look into that.
We should have jumped on it when we had the chance. And it's interesting you're talking about data analysis now and it's used. We train, I coach a football team and we train next to a girls' football team. And they've all got the GPRS trackers on and everything else. And you know, I'm not, I couldn't tell you exactly what level they're playing at, but they're certainly not playing at Celtic level. You know, and this is a very much a grassroots level kind of thing, and they're all, so even at that level they're using some form of data to kind of manage it, and data is so useful for, and it's not even just in football. We both use it in our day jobs, you know, you look at your insights and your social media platforms and views on YouTube, and likewise us in here, we use it for our social media and how we're having an impact and what audiences we've got, and it's all data, and if we all had this 20 years ago, we could all been doing this for 20 years longer, you know, and getting the rewards out of it. But if Celtic have had that opportunity to get that years ago and started shortly said that gap between European top boys and us, and, you know, you've kind of got to work smarter instead of working harder. And I think we've kind of maybe dropped the ball then, but it sounds like that we've not worked smarter, we've worked harder, and it's doubly hard because we're Celtic, we're playing in Scottish football to keep track.
I think we go back to the word complacency. Complacency in thinking that we don't really need that tool because we're Celtic and we've got all this money and we can throw money at it and it'll be fine. And every now and again it might not work, but generally speaking it will. And they've got this attitude of put the medals on the table, look at our success, look at the money in the bank. You're telling us how to run our football club. We know what we're doing. So there's an attitude there as well. And I think that with regards to it, there's going to be a massive, if it's already part of it, I'm sure, there's going to be a massive onus on AI within the data. So if you then fire in this is what I'm looking for. The AI is also going to be working to give you the results as well. But again, as we all know with AI, a lot of that is to do with the quality of the information you put.
Yeah, you only get back out of what you put in it.
Without a doubt. I've even started using it with my taglines, right? So what you get now on YouTube is you've got an inspiration tab within the studio. So it will tell you, here's the top 5 things you can talk about in relation to Celtic. If you put one of these into your tagline, more people will watch the show.
Yeah.
So it's all about, they've got a wide range of information and they're filtering it all out and saying, talk about A, B, C, D, and E, and people will watch your show.
People jump all over it.
They may not come back if it's rubbish, but they'll certainly watch it the first thing. So this is O'Neill, this is recruitment and where we're going. I do want to talk about Brendan Rodgers, because if there's one person who's been almost consigned to the history books already, it's him. And you look at the record they had, right? I was a massive Brendan Rodgers fan.
Yeah.
I've disagreed with people on Acsom. I've disagreed with people in the comment section about this. But when he came back, I honestly don't think we could have got a better quality manager to replace Ange Postecoglou at that time. Other people said it's complacent. Ball John, it's lazy. We're going back to the well. And they were right. But what he did bring is he brought success.
100%.
So first 2 seasons, a couple of doubles. We didn't quite get the treble. We got very close last season. We should have got the treble. I mean, I think what were we, 8 minutes away from winning the game against Aberdeen. Rubbish game. And they beat us in a penalty shootout, which is a lottery. But moving on from last season to this season, I was quite positive, Scott. I'm thinking Bayern Munich, we keep going on about the Bayern Munich game in February and how close we came to that. Where did it all go wrong for you, Brendan?
I mean, I think when you look at his first tenure, and we're talking there about complacency, is that what Brendan Rodgers is? You know, he had that very successful first time that we had in there, and he was so successful, and then he went away, and you know, even when he was coming back, everybody was like, "Oh, don't bring that rat back," and all that kind of stuff, all that kind of carry on, you know. And he kind of came back, and you tell that great story about down when he was at Liverpool and they had the transfer committee, and then they were saying, "Look, this is the guy you should buy, and these are the ones you shouldn't." And again, it's all a bit on data. It's all talking about data, and he's kind of came back, and it's almost like he's kind of left everything back in 2000 and 2010, 12 and everything else. You know, he's kind of not moved on with the times as well. I think you've seen that in the football. I think he thought he would come back and it would just all magically happen, and it'd be swashbuckling Celtic with Scott Sinclair in the left, and you know, and scoring goals for fun and everything else, and he never really had that this time. Again, is that because of what happened in between the club, you know, where we've not found another Scott Sinclair in that time for him to come back. So, I mean, he did walk into a great team with Ange. Ange with a fantastic team, you know, but as a part of Brendan not moving with the times as well, and did we suffer as a football club, not as fans more than anything, but as a football club as well, where has he played his role in kind of keeping the data at arm's length as well? Because apparently that's what he was doing at Liverpool before even his first tenure.
I think that's all coming out from previous jobs. But you look at that first transfer window, and history will tell us it was a disaster. Nawrocki and Palma and all these guys, Yang, who one of the very few survivors for that window. But, and this is the but now, and it's with hindsight, there's maybe players in there who have been discarded too soon. You look at the aforementioned Nawrocki, you look at Lagerbielke, who came back.
Had a great game.
He was a colossal performance is how it was described. Rodgers wouldn't play him. Unless we were desperate, Rodgers wouldn't play him. Wouldn't play Nawrocki. He even admitted last season that in the games Nawrocki played, had Dane Money been fit, he'd have played. So there's a resistance there, isn't there? And I think you then have a personal issue where it's me versus the recruitment team, or me versus the board. So everybody was telling me that Paul Tisdale was Brendan's choice. Now, what I do, Scott, is I try and get as many sources of information as I possibly can to piece it all together from the outside looking in. And from what I've gathered, Paul Tisdale was not Brendan Rodgers' choice. Now, they knew each other through Anton Rodgers, named after Anton Rogan, apparently, who played for Exeter City under Paul Tisdale.
Also Celtic in a friendly, remember that?
That became a bugbear of mine when Brendan left, right? because I went on about ego and you know, imagine going on tour with Celtic and taking your laddie, right,
A game.
and giving him a game.
It's mad, eh?
Imagine being one of the young boys who didn't get a game because Anton Rodgers got a game.
And it's interesting you used the word ego, because I think there's a lot of that with Brendan the second time in particular. And I know us as fans, is it because of the misinformation, that gap in information? But maybe he's been telling the board the whole time, oh, you don't need that data, I know what I'm doing. You know, the same way that we all think that the board are saying that to us, oh, you don't question us, we know what we're doing, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Has that been a thing? I know we're only filling in the gaps, but has Brendan that whole time they're saying, oh, to the board, oh, you don't need that data system and all that. I know what I'm talking, I'm a football manager, I know what I'm talking about, I know a player when I see it, all that kind of carry on. So it's hard on to judge, but again, because there's that void in communication, everybody thinks of us. We're Scottish, we're pessimistic in nature, and as a Celtic support, and Ross Desmond mentioned it as well, we're very anti-establishment. You know, so anything of authority or anything that kind of perceived to be up here, we'll question it. We'll always hold them to account a lot more than probably other societies around the world.
Yeah.
So if you've got that, no communication gap in here, and we're filling in the blanks, we're always going to think the worst. It's just our Scottish nature, unfortunately, that we always think the worst. And is that because of our football over the years? Perhaps.
Yeah.
But is there another side to this where maybe Brendan's been telling the board, and you know what, you don't need that, all that system stuff. I know what I'm talking about. I know a player when I see it. He's not a player. I don't care what you tell me.
Yeah.
He's not a player. So I know, like you say, us as fans, we always think the worst of the guys at the top of the tree, but I don't know, has there been something in there where Brendan's maybe not played his part in there and it's all the ego?
Ego's, for me, I think ego is so necessary at that level. You've got to have
Be
it.
confident.
Got to have it. But if it's an ego battle between, say, Brendan Rodgers and the hierarchy at Celtic, then that's a problem. Because then you're doing things that are going to outdo each other. And that's what we've seen. It started, for me, frittering away near the end to the point where it was a bit murky with the Sun leak and then Brendan getting asked about it in press conferences and saying it's a cowardly act. That's all, for me, that's unnecessary drama, right?
100%. And if you're going to battle ego with someone and you're Brendan Rodgers, the last person you pick is Dermot Desmond.
That's,
You know,
that's beyond ego.
correct. I mean,
You go from egomaniac to megalomaniac.
well, and he's highly successful in what he's done over the
Yeah.
years. He's the reason me and you're sitting here, and we're not sitting in the Bahamas or in a yacht the way, or playing golf the way he is. You know, he's a multi-billionaire, you know. So he's probably feels he's got that right to have an ego, but he's the last person I'd go into an ego battle with.
There's going to be one winner.
Aye.
There's
So
only
there's
going to be
ever
one.
going to be, and we've seen that.
Aye. And by the way, he had a relationship with Brendan Rodgers, just like he had a relationship with Mark O'Neill, and still does. Neil Lennon, still does. Peter Lawwell. So it also shows you, I mean, if I'm in that circle, and I'm clearly never going to be in that circle, if I'm in that clique, I'd be thinking, wait a minute, if he can do that with Brendan was his golden boy, you know. He gave him the job twice as well. He could do that with me as well, and that's not a nice place to be. And then you've got
Lord of the Flies
the
stuff. innit?
atmosphere. It is, and it's the atmosphere. But the Tisdale thing for me, one of my biggest concerns is he's still at the football club, right? So is Gavin Strachan. Just about everybody else has been cleared out.
You know, interesting when Gavin Strachan, he gets slagged for having an iPad. Data.
I know.
You know, and everybody slagged him for data, and he was doing it. One of the guys who was doing it.
Watching Acsom. Didn't let him kid you.
But there you go, he's still at the club. Why is he still at the club? Because he
Right.
probably had that data thing. I don't know. That's it.
I mean, see with Dermot Desmond, and obviously we've got to watch what we say at times in terms of legal. However, there's nothing wrong with giving your opinion. I would suggest that the Strachans are absolutely within that circle.
Mhm.
We might call it a clique, that circle of trust, as someone once said on a Hollywood movie. And I also think Tisdale's within that circle. He wasn't Brendan Rodgers' man. He was always Dermot Desmond's man, right? And they met at a Strachan wedding.
All right.
Yeah, that is the chat, right? So he was given a job without it being publicised or advertised, and there wasn't that normal process of going through candidates and saying, Scott's better than Paul John, we'll give Scott a job. He was in the know, if you like. He was in the circle, therefore he gets the job. My concern is, has he performed well enough, Scott, to give you confidence that regardless of who the manager is, Paul Tisdale's going to identify enough talent in January?
There's only going to be one answer right now. Back end of January, have we got a striker in? Have we got at least 2 players that can play wide right? Have we brought in another centre half? Because who knows what's happening with Carter Vickers, for instance? Are we potentially planning for Callum McGregor moving on? Are we potentially planning for Rio Tati moving on? Maeda moving on? You know, so, and I think at that level, in that kind of job, the proof's in the pudding. And unfortunately, the pudding is fan opinion. And we've seen it with our good pals at the other end of the city. Fan opinion can make or break these guys, and it doesn't matter what job they've got at that football club. Fan opinion, well, people have to listen to it at the end of the day. And I know we're doing some great work with the fans collective and stuff, and Not Another Penny and things. And again, it's fan opinion, and it's fans driving that, and you will see the results of that. I mean, again, as a business in another sector or whatever, you know, if I don't have customers coming through the door enjoying what they do, they don't come back.
Yep.
You know, so, and if they don't come back, that means we don't have a business, that means I don't have a job. So, you know, it's playing the opinion and producing results and doing that on a day in, day out basis is what's going to happen. And if you don't do it, then unfortunately the fan opinion will probably turn against.
The next time you appear on Acsom, we'll look back on this conversation. Were we right to let Martin O'Neill go? Were we right to allow Tisdale to be the man that does the January transfer window? You're right. And with hindsight, we'll be able to look back and say, right, we were lucky X, Y, and Z happened. Or, you know, who knows, will Nancy even be the manager by the time this show goes out on Friday night? We just don't know at the moment with Celtic. But Scott, you will be back. And I've got to thank you once again for your debut on A Celtic State of Mind.
No, it's been great to have you, and see you soon at Bad for more fan zones.
Thanks again for joining us on A Celtic State of Mind. Join us next Friday night at 6:30 for This is Acsom. Did you know that 1 in 5 men in the UK experience changes in sexual performance as they get older? MedX can provide support in minutes through a free online consultation. MedExpress has been one of the country's leading online pharmacies since 2013, with over 1.5 million customers. By completing a short online consultation, they'll suggest the right treatment for your concerns, from erectile dysfunction to premature ejaculation, all from the comfort of your home. Their UK-based clinical team will support you every step of the way and send your medication straight to your door. And the best bit is, the whole process is online. You don't have to visit your GP. Not everyone wants to or has the time to speak to their GP about their sexual performance. Accessing healthcare online doesn't need to be hard with MedExpress. Visit medexpress.co.uk to check your eligibility and get 30% off with code ACSOM.